What's going on, MMA fans? Welcome to my YouTube channel, These Things Happen in MMA. The goal of this channel is to highlight crazy and spectacular moments that have made MMA what it is today. In this episode, I'm going to talk about Travis Fulton and the insane records he holds over the course of his 23-year fight career. This is the story of Travis Fulton, the man with the most fights and most wins ever in MMA. Fulton is truly a pioneer in MMA, starting in 1996 at age 19 in a sport that was roughly only 3 years old. He was inspired to join the sport after watching UFC 3 and took up training with Pat Miletich at the legendary Miletich Fighting Systems in Iowa.
We got a very special treat, the number one most fights ever, Travis the Ironman Fulton. How did you get started, man? How did you get started? When did you get started into this whole game of punching people in the face for a living?
I watched Kumite, the Bloodsport, that movie, so I got obsessed with that and actually thought that tournament really existed. And I watched UFC 3, and I just became obsessed with it after that and was doing tough man competitions, just trying to find any way to get into the UFC. And I got hooked up with Monty Cox, and Monty Cox was a big promoter back in the 90s, and kind of just took off from there.
From the beginning, Fulton was someone that just loved to compete, and in his first year and a half in MMA, he would already have 26 fights to his name with a record of 18, 7, and 1. Some of the highlights from this time are bouts with fellow pioneers Jeremy Horn and Matt Lindland. After one long 15-minute round, the fight with Horn would end in a draw. The bout with Lindland would result in a loss by submission after 22 minutes of action. However, in an interview with Sean Al-Shadi, Fulton disputes the loss to Matt, claiming he tapped 2 minutes into the fight. Oh, that's from one of my first one-night tournaments. Knocked the first guy out in 14 seconds, then subbed Matt Lindland in 2 minutes with an armbar in the finals. Guy lied and said he didn't tap. So okay, fine, I'll beat you again. 20 minutes later I didn't. Imagine that. He did the same thing to Murilo Bustamante. Another bout of note from this time was his record-setting fight against Brad Koehler, who trained at the Hammer House school run by Mark Coleman. The fight took place at Promotion Hook and Shoot and lasted 52 minutes before Koehler won by submission, making this the longest MMA bout ever on North American soil. At 2.5 years in, the Ironman would now have an astounding 67 fights under his belt with a record of 49, 13, and 5. During this streak, he would rematch Jeremy Horn in a 20-minute contest that went to a draw yet again, and also fight legend Dan Severn in a fight that Dan won by submission. He also had his first fight outside of the US at the famed Pancras promotion in Japan against the giant killer Ikuhisa Minowa. Another popular fight from this time is his vicious KO slam of Jerry Bullock at Extreme Challenge 22 that would end up being his 7th fight that month.
And I can't remember who it was you fought. It was this crazy, you slammed this guy and he was just out of there. It was see, he knows what I'm talking about. It was the wildest thing to see.
Well, there's a huge story behind that fight too. I was in Brazil 2 days before that, and I won an 8-man tournament in Brazil, and we missed our flight, and we stayed in Brazil for an extra day. On the day of the fight, they had me fly back I got to Miami, and this is before 9/11, so you can kind of do whatever you want in an airport. Yeah. So I was like, hey, let's go to Utah. Can you fly me there? And yeah, and they flew me to Utah, and I got there at 5 o'clock. I was supposed to be in the tournament, and they didn't do any weigh-ins then. This wasn't super official stuff back in those days. There weren't even athletic commissions. When I got to the venue at 7 o'clock, one of the fighters who's on the other side of my bracket started complaining he wanted to see me weigh in. It was a 200 pounds and under tournament. I weighed 202. And so they're like, well, I guess you got to go cut weight. I'm like, I don't care. I won't fight then. So they stuck another guy in the tournament, and I went to the little taekwondo guy. He weighed 170s, but I weighed 200 pounds, so I looked a lot bigger than him. And he was doing that Jean-Claude Van Damme splits on 2 chairs. They were like, do you want to fight this guy? And he's like, all right, my style teaches me to fight anybody any size. I'll fight anybody. And we're all laughing. We're like, all right. Monty was promoter. He's like, don't kill this guy, Travis. I'm like, whatever. So, if you watch, I don't punch him. And I'm like, well, this is stupid. I'm like, I'll slam him, the crowd will cheer, and I'll put him in an arm bar. And the fucking idiot held on to me, so he landed on his head. Those were the days when guys really were. He was a taekwondo guy. He did taekwondo, and he was a high-ranking black belt in taekwondo, and that really was a time when that is all those guys did, before it became mixed martial arts, when everybody cross-trained. They trained their one martial art and went from there.
After 76 MMA bouts and winning 3 different tournaments all in the span of 3 years, the Ironman would finally get a shot at his dream to fight in the UFC in 1999. The opportunity would come against a big name in Pete Williams, who trained out of Ken Shamrock's renowned fight camp, the Lion's Den. Fulton would let the moment get the best of him and fought uncharacteristically that night, losing the contest by armbar 6.5 minutes in. The loss seemed to be a real turning point in Fulton's fight career, as he lost ambition, gained weight, and just stopped caring as much as he once did. Jeremy Horn and Travis Fulton at one point were really close friends and kindred spirits in the fight game. They both enjoyed fighting frequently, and currently Horn is sitting at 4th place on the list of most MMA fights with 120 at the time of this recording. Horn credits Fulton's lackluster attitude towards training as the reason that their friendship deteriorated. It's not that I didn't like him, but I mean it obviously frustrated me when I would see the talent that he had and the potential that he had, and he would just kind of like, I'm not too concerned about this. I'm not going to train that hard. I don't really care. It bugged me. He absolutely could have been really, really good in Pride, UFC, whatever. He just needed to focus. Fulton has his own point of view on the matters of training.
I won't spar hard ever. That's what I would tell these guys is, you see all those boxers that are punch drunk. It's because these guys go to the gym and they spar 6 days a week, like hard. They wear that headgear. That doesn't protect your brain. That protects you from getting cut. So, I mean, I don't like to. I like to move. I like to go in there and spar light. Know I'm getting hit and everything, but I don't like to spar. If you're gonna punch me in the face, I want to get paid for it. So.
Even with Fulton's nonchalant approach towards fighting, he still managed to get a unanimous decision win in the octagon against David Dodd 2 months later at UFC 21. Fulton was supposed to fight for the promotion a 3rd time at UFC 24, but ended up breaking his hand at a different promotion 1 week prior to the event. This infuriated the UFC greatly as they now had to seek a last-minute replacement, and just like that, his UFC run was over. This setback, however, wouldn't deter Fulton from continuing to compete, racking up another 69 fights over the course of the next 3 years, from 2000 to 2002. Notable names he fought those years include Ian Freeman, Rico Rodriguez, Renato Sobral, Evan Tanner, Rich Franklin, Forrest Griffin, and Dan Severn, 3 times. He ended up losing all these bouts with the exception of a draw in one of the fights with Severn. In his first fight of 2003, Fulton would rematch his once close friend Jeremy Horn for a 3rd time. The bout wouldn't look anything like their first 2 fights though, as Fulton's team threw in the towel 50 seconds into the 2nd round. The Ironman was lacking any real motivation to strive for greatness during this period, summed up perfectly by a quote from his memoir. The loss to Horn served as another sad reminder of how pathetic my fighting career had become. Travis would finish out 2003 with 27 fights in total, winning most of them and going 21, 5, and 1 that year. The start of 2004 would be another turning point in Fulton's career and would begin one of the most impressive runs the sport has ever seen. From March of 2004 to May of 2007, the Ironman compiled a record of 64 wins and just 1 loss. If you want to get crazier though, extend the time frame to April of 2010, and Travis Fulton went an insane 101-4 during this time. That's a win percentage of just over 95%. To be sincere, it definitely wasn't against the best opposition. However, in my opinion, it's still incredibly insane to have that many fights and win 95% of them. It was roughly around this time that Fulton would get another call from The Big Show to be a contestant on The Ultimate Fighter Season 10 with coaches Rashad Evans and Rampage Jackson. Fulton, who was 30 years old at the time, declined the offer, stating that he just didn't care and didn't want it anymore. That season ended up being one of the most popular in TUF's history, and it's hard not to imagine how the show would have affected Fulton's fight career had he accepted instead. Even so, the promotion would come calling one last time with an offer to fight at UFC 87 against Brazilian fighter Andre Guzmão. Fulton again turned down the offer from the UFC, and ultimately that fight went to an unknown fighter named John Jones. Travis continued on competing after this chapter of his life was closed, albeit at a much slower pace than his first 14 years in the sport. From 2010, when his ridiculous streak ended, to his last MMA bout in 2019, Fulton would only compete another 22 more times in that 9-year window. Jeff Munson, Andrei Arlovsky, and a rematch with Rico Rodriguez are a few of the bigger fights he had during this time.
Andrei Arlovsky, 2 days before your fight with Travis Fulton, what's going through your head right now?
I'm ready. This guy, no joke. He has over 300 fights. He has a great, in my opinion, it's a great fighting experience, and everything what Greg showed me, what he taught me during the camp, I will try to bring on Saturday night.
What do you think are the pros and cons about fighting a guy who fights this often? Do you think he's going to be more reckless in the cage?
Back a couple years ago, I wish I fought like often, but definitely not a few fights a week. I don't know if he felt great at that time. If his body let him fight so many fights, I think it's good for him. It might be not good for everybody, but I guess if he went through all these fights, and he's still pretty dangerous and he's in good shape, so I guess it was good for him.
Fulton's second to last fight made some headlines across the MMA sphere when opponent Jonathan Ivey had Travis rocked in their fight, but decided to tap out of the contest so his idol wouldn't have to take any more punishment.
And I've seen a lot of discussion about your fight with Travis Fulton. Can you clear the air on what really happened that night?
We were on the ground. The referee was not standing us up. I stood up on my own and decided to stop the fight.
Tell us the real reason. Why did you tap and stop the fight?
Who have I looked up to in my career and tried to pattern myself and emulate, I guess, a little bit? It's pretty much just two guys since the time I've turned professional. Tank Abbott and Travis Fulton. Those are the two guys that I've always looked up to. They're both tattooed on my right leg. Fight got to a point where beating Travis wasn't as important to me as saving my hero, per se, from receiving unnecessary damage. Travis, he was done fighting, and it should have been stopped at that point.
Fulton's final MMA bout with M1 Global was a career-defining fight and the perfect way to cap off his 23 years in the sport. This would be Fulton's 320th contest in MMA, and he was facing Shannon the Cannon Rich, who happens to be the fighter with the second most sanctioned bouts in MMA history, with this being his 149th.
We got a special one today. We got Ironman Travis Fulton, and we got Shannon the Cannon Rich, the number 1 and number 2 for most fights in combat sports.
Yeah, so I guess the first question, I'll start with you, Shannon. You guys know each other. You've been on fight cards together. Obviously, you have the 2 most fights. What was the barrier why this fight hasn't happened until now?
Well, for a long time, I wasn't fighting in Travis's weight class. I was a little guy. And I'm getting old and getting fat, so now I'm a heavyweight.
What do you think, Travis? Same kind of assessment? It was just a different weight class?
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. I said Shannon decided to get fat and be heavyweight.
Why now? Why now does this fight happen?
Well, for me, guys, I've been that guy that never will fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. This fight came up with M1 Global. There was a guy named Sean Wheelock. He reached out to me and said, Shannon, I've got a super fight for you. I know you'll fight anybody. How would you like to fight the guy with the most fights in the world, being that you're number 2? How would you like to fight the guy that's number 1? And I said, Travis Fulton. And he goes, absolutely, Travis Fulton. I said, man, the Ironman? I would love to fight this guy. It'd be an honor. I mean, who has more experience than Travis Fulton? And, his record speaks for himself. He's one hell of a fighter. I think we'll put on one hell of a show for the fans. So,
Travis, I guess same to you. What does this fight mean to you?
It'll be fun. It's a big event, and a couple of guys, and we're older guys, and it's like a Chuck Tito type thing, they're relevant. They're the UFC champs from the old days, and we're the 2 guys that have had a ton of fights. So I don't think anybody's ever asked me why I never fought Shannon before, but I just never really thought about it. But it's like, well, yeah, it does make sense, doesn't it? So
the booking of this fight alone was a huge moment for the sport and ended with Fulton getting a win in his final MMA bout. To be clear, Fulton hasn't officially retired. He's actually had a boxing and a bare-knuckle boxing match since his fight with Shannon. In all likelihood, that'll be the last time Fulton steps into a cage or a boxing ring ever again, as some disturbing news would come to light about the Ironman.
Travis Fulton, who has an unbelievable 320 MMA fights to his name, has been charged with sexual exploitation of a child, possession of child porn, and receipt of child porn. His trial is set for April. He is also awaiting trial for domestic violence. Fulton has 255 wins in his 320 fight MMA career. He also has 75 boxing matches under his belt for a total of 395 combat sports competitions.
It's sad and unfortunate that Travis Fulton's story ended in this way. It's clear Travis had demons inside of fighting as well as outside of it. What was once a fighter with clear ambitions and goals turned into a fighter that was just going through the motions and cared more about booking a fight than actually training for one. As of the recording of this video, Travis is awaiting trial and could face up to 70 years in prison if convicted. Fulton's career is forever marred by these recent charges. Horrible as they are though, what he's accomplished in this sport can't be swept under the rug. Fulton's 320 MMA bouts is literally more than double that of second place Shannon Rich. Aside from Fulton's 320 MMA bouts, he also has 75 boxing matches, 11 kickboxing fights, and 1 bare-knuckle boxing contest to add to his resume. All of these fights in these different combat sports add up to a staggering total of 407 bouts. Travis also holds the record for most wins in MMA with 255. As I mentioned before, he also has the record for the longest MMA bout on North American soil. His streak of 101 wins and 4 losses is one of the most impressive runs ever. He even competed against fighter Roy Prozac a total of 8 times in MMA, and I can't be certain, but I imagine that's a record too. He won all 8 of those fights, by the way. The sport has evolved a lot since Fulton first started fighting, and no fighter will ever come close to the records he set, now with commissions, set rounds, and mandatory suspensions to factor in. What Travis has accomplished here is truly something that will never be replicated and will forever remain at the top of the all-time MMA records. As always, I posted some related videos down below for those interested in taking a look. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below with a topic you'd like to hear me cover in a future episode. Thanks for watching and supporting my channel.
That kind of leads into my next question. You know, like you said, back in the day, everybody was specialists, right? And now it's more like everybody is kind of a jack of all trades kind of thing. From your point of view, I'd love to hear your point of view. Like, how has combat sports in general really morphed, you know, from when you started, you know, until how it is, you know, now?
The events back then, in those days, the rules were made up by the event. So, I mean, I went to one event, it'd be bare knuckle. Another event would have no time limit. Another event would have like 1 20-minute round. Another event would have like 3 3-minute rounds. So there was no unified rules. And one event you could stomp on a guy. Another event you couldn't punch him with a closed fist on the ground. Now the way it is, I mean, everything is unified. So, I mean, even the first time I fought in the UFC, in UFC 20, the time limit was, it was 1 10-minute round and a 3-minute overtime. In the second UFC that I fought in, which was UFC 21, it was 2 5-minute rounds. That's it.
That's kind of wild. And another fact, there's a section that says you had a slow year. You fought more times in 2009. It said I had it counted at 7. Then a lot of guys fight over a 3-year span. That was your slow year. 7
well, my
fights.
4 years is now. I mean, like I'll have 1 or 2 or 3 a year, but I mean, I'm old now. You know, I mean, I'd still like to at least have 1 a year. I've never like officially retired. That's what's so funny is I've had people for like 10 years saying, I thought you retired. It's like, when the fuck did I say I retired? You know, I'm only 41. So, I mean, as long as my body's still capable, I might as well be able to do it.